reason I wanted us to hear that for this month is actually, I did close it, but there's the slideshow. I've actually got some slides for today. As I mentioned, the theme this month is around our stewardship for the earth. And it's also about accessing it through love. And if you think about it, I don't know about you, but I know for me that I have spent a lot of my life taking for granted my physical body. You know, I get up and I do what I'm going to do. I kind of have my ritual, I have my routine, but I don't, or I haven't always been intentionally, deliberately conscious of the stewardship that it involves. Now, there have been invitations that Spirit has given to me because of that kind of lackadaisical attitude. So with diagnosed with diabetes at the age of 7, part of the whole reason that I became disconnected from my body it was a way that I didn't have to feel the pain of the daily injections. It was part of the way that I could, by disconnecting body from mind, I didn't have to think of myself as a physical being. I could think of myself largely as an intellectual being. And then you can imagine it became somewhat distressing to me when I discovered that one of the features of diabetes, one of the symptoms, is that you can lose consciousness. So one of the very things that I held as a value, being able to appreciate my identity as an intellectual being, gets called into question when I don't have any intellect left. Because literally the brain is shut down and I'm just not able to do much. I share this story because I suspect that I may not be the only one who comes up with a strategy and then finds that it doesn't entirely work for me. And I give this also in the context of that notion of stewardship of our planet. Because like Mykal's reading about we care for our planet by caring for ourselves, that there's this relationship, there's this dance between ourselves on this world and the very world that we're on. And how we care for ourselves influences the way that we'll present ourselves in the world. Stephanie, you identified your friend who is struggling with getting to work and feeling completely stressed out. Has anyone here ever found themselves going somewhere and you know that you just have every expectation that this is going to be stressful, and that there can be this overpowering sense that there's really nothing I can do about this. This is the system, and I'm just a little cog in this system, so what can I do about this high-stress place? We can think the same way about ourselves on the planet that we're on right now. There is a big hurricane brewing on the east, likely to strike Florida and Georgia and South Carolina and North Carolina. What is it that we as individuals can do? There, you know, these wind speeds of over 100 miles per hour, water that's pulled in from the sky and from the sea, just in this mass, in this they've called it a megastorm. What is it that we can do? One of the things that I would propose is that we can hold the people that are living along there, we can hold the highest and best for them. For those circumstances, we can hold them in our hearts and minds. We can care about the outcome. I'm going to talk a little bit about some specific ways that we can show love, but I'm just starting there as a way to be thinking about it. So if you want to turn on the Consider recognizing what is happening. Stop letting glittering distractions, our materialistic culture's surface values distract us. Let us face the reality of our outer ecological crisis. Let us pay attention to our loss of the sacred and to our culture's call to sacrifice our sense of interbeing with all of creation. The song, Colors of the Wind, is a gentle reminder that we may have let ourselves be distracted by the cultural call that we can satisfy ourselves with this thing that's showing up in our mailbox. Either our email box or our home mailbox, a list of and picture brochure full of all kinds of things we never knew we never needed. Suddenly, there's this urgency that gets handed to us. And we can start to choose how it is that we want to respond to that urgency. You know, I would say the first step is to just pause for a moment, because how many people have, again, you know, if you've ever seen late night TV, you've got 40 minutes. And the countdown starts. There's only 29 minutes left. To, you know, and if you don't call, and if you call within the next 10 minutes, you'll get this special offer. You'll get double what it was. So it's not only this, you get this and this other gift. There's this press that grows and builds and builds. As so much of the time, with Science of Mind, it's about being mindful and paying attention to what it is and how it is that we're responding. What gets called forth from us with that sense of urgency? Can we ask ourselves? Can we just pause and say, did I really ever need this thing? If I didn't have this commercial burning into my brain, would there be any sense of need? Or is it just like an itch, something that gets triggered, and we just can't stop ourselves from scratching it and saying, yes, I'm going to get this. So I would say that our first trick is to just pay attention. If we were to turn that off, if we would stop listening, if we turn the sound down, how would we respond? How would we feel? Now, how many people have, I know that Stephanie, you've experienced this with your mom's home, that there are more than one item of something. And that cultural imperative, you know, that idea that if you really like it, you should get it and 7 others. Because it will only last so long. And you've got to be able to replace it at least 7 times before our lives end, because you know we wouldn't be complete without that thing. I mean, my ex-father-in-law would always buy like 3 of something. If he got something he liked, he would go back and he would buy 3 more of it just to be sure, because it was one of those things that if you found that you liked it, it's like you might as well take advantage of it. The difficulty with that is that it does perpetuate this notion of material focus and a heightened material need. One of the teachings in the Science of Mind is the idea that divinity is abundance. That we live in an abundant world. And isn't it a little odd that I'm saying, let's consider how we use that abundance? Maybe it is a little odd, and I'm going to have you come with me in that little bit of oddness. That the notion of stewarding is to be thoughtful about it. It's a little bit like raising children. Children want what they want, and they want it When do they want it?
Now.
And how well do they respond to explanations that now is not the time?
We're so
Why?
So, or mealtime with children. You know, the adult knows that there are certain things that a child needs to ingest, that need to come into their bodies. And that child might not want that thing anywhere near its body. And I use that as examples because we get to, in the role of parents, we get to be stewards for the child. I think we've also seen those circumstances where the child managed and determined everything that they wanted. And their parents are the ones that are saying, yes, they want that, and yes, they want that. How many of us have encountered those spoiled children? The ones whose parents have acquiesced to every desire that child has. Consider how, on a spectrum of ease to difficulty, where would you place your ability to get along easily or with difficulty with that person who's had every wish acquiesced to? My experience is that it's not all that easy, that it's much more on the difficult end of things. Again, I use that illustration to characterize what stewardship means. Sometimes stewardship means being able to say no. Sometimes stewardship means being able to say, let's wait and see. Sometimes stewardship means it's not here now, but there may be something that comes along that's better in the future. Now again, I don't know about any of you, but I know for myself, sometimes I'm fearful that something better might not come along. And I'm perfectly happy to accept this okay-ish sort of thing rather than to wait for what will be really what I need. And again, I can't speak for you, but I can speak for me. I've definitely plopped myself in relationships like that. I was in a relationship for several years with this gentleman who lived with his family, and they didn't know that he was gay. And so I would have to go and visit him when his parents were already in bed. You know, and there was a little niggle in the back of my head that said this probably isn't the best smartest relationship. But sometimes we don't listen to that little niggle. Sometimes we ignore that niggle. And again, I can't speak for you, but I know that had I listened to the niggle a little bit earlier, some hardship and pain could have been avoided. And it was one of those things where I had been reluctant to be honest and to say this isn't working for me. One of the things that ended up happening is that he experienced feelings of competition with my children. He knew that I really valued my children, and he really wanted to be first. And I had said, you know, I need you to be, you know, minimally co-equal. I need you to have a respect for my children. And then the way he responded was he was hurt. So he said, you know, they're little cows. I don't know why I have to do. And again, it was one of those things that are like, he would say these mean things about my kids, and I would say, you know, I don't think my children, I don't think of them as little cows. I don't think little cows is a nice way to describe my two little daughters. He said, well, I'm only kidding. You know, and then I'd say that kind of psychology thing. It's like, you know, when people use words like that, they may think that they're kidding, but they're really expressing hurt and anger. And he said, you know, you don't use your psychology on me. It's, you know, I'm just kidding. But I didn't have the courage to steward my own feelings. fortunately, to an extent, it didn't feel fortunate at the time, he came out to visit me, and I had a journal, and he read my journals.
Oh.
And then I came home, and he's like furious at me because I had written stuff in my journals. He's like, why didn't you tell me this stuff? And it's like, well, it's journals. And I use that as a kind of place to process my feelings, and I shared with you the things that I had done. And it's like, well, you're a big liar. And, you know, so he's angry at what I wrote about my feelings, and I'm angry that he violated my space and, you know, he had to dig into my closet to get my journals out. So the fact that he, you know, it wasn't like I left my journal on my nightstand. It was that it was in a box in my closet. So for him to have gone through and found it, set up some other warning bells. I'm like, what is he doing digging through my stuff in my house? Is this a person? At any rate, I tell this story because I'd like to make it be a case, a point of study. Sometimes I know I've made some big mistakes. There were great things that I learned from that relationship. And among those was that I needed to be thinking a little bit more about what it is that I actually needed. How to have a real relationship, to be able to let go of what was good enough. It's better to have something than nothing. Well, sometimes it's not better to have something than nothing. Sometimes nothing is perfectly adequate. And being able to let ourselves know that that's the case. Let's go to the next slide. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to take us on a little bit of a journey around the ways that people love. And this is from the work of a man named Gary Chapman. And he came up with an idea of 5 languages of love. And I want to present these because I want us to think about them both as how we love ourselves and how we love on this planet where we are. So one of the first ways that he characterized is the notion of giving and receiving gifts. So take a moment and consider the loves in our lives who express that love by giving. That they just thought about what it is that we would enjoy to have. Let's consider that that's a way of showing love. Now, I would say we live on a planet which is continually giving to us. Did anybody get up this morning and have to put on an oxygen mask to be able to breathe? Did anyone have to walk across a desert to find a little oasis for a glass of water? I bet we all had air and water. And if we didn't have food at home, there's certainly food here, so please feel free to get some food here. We live on a planet which is continually giving to us. One of the difficulties we've had on this planet is that we've been very good takers. We've been very disproportionate takers. There are writers who have characterized our cultural stance. Our cultural stance is one that has treated the planet as a big old dead thing that is designed to be taken from and used up. One of the ways to steward is to become more thoughtful about how we give and receive from this planet. Are we using things that can be used over again? Are we using things, how are we using things? What will happen to it? One of the things that was very striking about, in Europe, they think about the full life from the creation to the end of a product. Part of it is that Europe was a smaller place where they just had to be much more deliberate about that stuff. The United States is a much bigger, spread out thing, and you could throw stuff away at far reaches. But the problem is we've become more populated. those far reaches end up being where people live. So how do we be more thoughtful about intimacy? You can go to the next one. I'd like us to think about those relationships where the other person that we were with, it was just all about quality time. It was just about being with them. Now, maybe you've had that experience, or maybe you haven't. But according to Gary Chapman, that's one of the ways that people can demonstrate love. Just making the time. Being intentional about saying, I will be there. Was one of the things that made it difficult for that man that I was in a relationship with. If he was living with his parents, and our time together was the phone calls from his parents' house when it was midnight where he was, so that they wouldn't hear him on the telephone, I really appreciated quality time when he got here. But I also appreciated quality time with my daughters. And quality times with my daughters and quality time with him were difficult because he was feeling neglected, that I would want to be spending time with them and not time with him. How is it that quality time has been a way that we have accepted love or given love? Just be with that for a moment and reflect on that. And as we consider that, how much of us actually spend any quality time with this world that we live in? Now, I know that Tayan spends regular quality time at Kubota Gardens. I know that Mykal spends regular quality time with the hose out in the backyard, the front yard. Every single plant is receiving quality time of his attention. But I would also say, so Mykal's giving quality time to the planet. I would say that Mykal also receives some quality time, because if Mykal didn't care about it, Mykal would just not have a garden. So consider the kind of quality time that we have and that we can spend. Is it just going outside and breathing in for a moment and appreciating it? Recognizing, I went outside yesterday and I said, you know what, this summer there was very little of that smoke that filled the air the way it did the past 2 summers. Wasn't it nice to be able to go outside and just breathe? To not have to wonder about the air quality, or not have to think, should I have a little mask on to protect myself? So quality time is a way to experience love, and it's a way to show love, and it's a way to share love. Speaking words of affirmation. How many times has someone shown us their love with the words that they use in a relationship with us? So one of the things that my sister and I were having a conversation, because I went to go visit my mom. My mom's not doing well, so it used to drive me crazy because my mom would spend hours in the card store. And the thing was that she was looking for just the right, perfect words for each person. She spends months preparing for her Christmas card list. What is it she's going to say? How is she going to share it? How is she going to share about what were the things in her life that were important? Really, speaking words of affirmation, that was one of the primary ways that my mother expressed love. And I think I inherited it from her to an extent. I remember irritating my dad because he's like, why can't you just say it right out? You're just so, and I paused and thought, and even the other day I had a meeting, there was a conflict at work. And the one person really wanted support, and the other person essentially also wanted support. But the one was a manager and the other was a worker. And the worker was like, why do I have to offer affirmation to the manager? But I was in a position to be able to acknowledge what it was that the manager wanted, because she stated it very clearly. I just want someone to notice that I have this really hard job. And it can be really difficult when we see that people who are getting paid better than we are want to be affirmed in another way beyond the money that they're making. But I could very honestly state my appreciation. And I think it makes a difference. I think that our words can have a huge power. Saw 2 movies this weekend that really codified that. One was in the Harry Potter series, and Dumbledore is meeting with Harry after Harry has been killed by Voldemort. And Voldemort says, I always believed that I had a really great way with words. And that words have a power that we seldom consider. The other one was in Doctor Strange. And the Sorcerer Supreme tells him that words are spells. Words are programs. If you like that language better than spells. That there is a power to our words. So what are the words that we are using in relation to the planet? Do we speak of the planet as a dead thing? Or do we name and declare the planet as this living, complicated, complex system of systems of systems? How do we use our words when we think about this planet where we live? Go to the next one. How many people have had a lover who is just in loving service to us? Someone who has really thought about what it is that we need, and they shape their actions to care for us in that way. The notion of service has also been a teaching with Science of Mind, that service is a spiritual practice. Stephanie is regularly in service here. She serves in her service as a practitioner, she is listening through a particular lens. She's listening, how do I strip away the story, and how do I hear what it is that gets to the divine truth in this situation. Tayan is doing the same thing in her counseling work. How many people come to Tayan because they are longing for some kind of change? They're either personally longing or they've been told they have to get it. Think for a moment about the ways that we have received service, or the ways that we've given service as expressions of love. So, physical touch. People don't have to think very hard or very long to figure out that that can be an important element in a relationship. It's well known. They've seen it, they've studied it. Children who receive touch develop differently from children who do not receive touch. There are, all of the stories of those children from the former Soviet Union who were raised in orphanages where they were just left to their own devices. And these children have a very difficult time as adults, as children growing up, to even understand how it is to relate. They did a study with little monkeys. They raised a monkey with a wooden stick figure. And you may not be surprised to learn that the monkeys raised with the little stick figure did not do so well when it came time to care for their own baby monkeys. Creation needs touch, needs expression. I heard it said that people need a hug at least 7 times a day. Now, that can be challenging. How do we become conscious of receiving that? How do we become conscious of giving that? And maybe it's not a full-on body hug, but how might we hug somebody with the way that we engage with them? How might we convert our words into hugs of care? How might we let our eye contact show genuine love, show genuine care, show that person is the center of our attention for that moment? And in that center of attention, how do we lift that moment? So what I'm going to have us do now, I am going to ask us to either pair up or get into a group of 3 and just briefly talk about your preferred love language and a commitment that you're going to make about that love language to caring for yourself and the planet.
You have a list.
Oh.
No. Okay.
No,
I'll just remember.
Would you like to come and sit with us?
You and I talked together.
I'm going to set the timer for 2 minutes to start, and so we'll do a total of 4 minutes.
Well, I think maybe 6.
Okay, 6
and
minutes.
4, huh?
Okay.
4 for us?
Okay.
You said
I'm going to set the timer for 3 minutes, and then I'll swap it
I'll
over.
go. I live in a retirement home, and one would think, mostly it's my mom, one would think
not
that
really.
if you planned it right and didn't scare people, that you could have a lot of hugs every day. And I don't know, but it has never occurred to me to do that. Even though I like these people very much, most of them I like very much. Sometimes I do reach out and touch somebody's arm or something, and wonder if even that is unappreciated. I don't know. I'm coming on to them or something like that. So, but it occurred to me just now. I have several women that are special to me. They're interesting. They read the same books I read, and they seem to like me. And I could just say to them after, maybe after having a little conversation, let's have a hug. And I'm sure it would be fun. They wouldn't feel that I was coming on to them sexually, I don't think. I think they feel about me the same way I feel about them. And it just occurred to me, so I'm talking about the fact that there are some women there that I feel fairly close to. I believe we do need, I've heard it as 4, but I meant 4 and more.
Because that's why I said I think 2
And
is kind
I
of.
like the idea of 7, it would be nice to,
So there was word of affirmation. I mean,
Quality time.
yes.
Is it that?
Quality, no, quality time.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, I thought you were just focusing.
No, there were all the ones, you could pick which one you wanted to talk about.
Oh, that's for me, it actually is.
Uh-oh.
That is gifts. That is kind of my I used to think it was.
Yeah.
I walked to the post office yesterday and there was an airport and my son was I guess that was her office, so that's a different. Yeah, so, but just being friendly,
Right.
Mykal, she just bought a tractor, but we weren't, there was no, feeling being afraid of this person or anything, and I guess vice versa, so it was great.
Okay, that was the 3 minutes.
All right, so.
You're happy now. So I think there are a variety of ways, definitely, words of affirmation. Knowing that I can lift people up more so. And so being more conscious of that. And acknowledging people when they do something. I think I'm good for acknowledging people when they do something for me, but just acknowledging when they've done something well. And lifting and encouraging in those ways. Another way is I'm thinking of, I mean, service, it's also, well, I forgot exactly what it was, but it was quality time. So since I've been off work, I have one of the things I'm really happy about, and this with words of affirmation, is that how I'm taking care of my body. And so I had, started eating better and started moving my body more. And so I continued that. So on the days that I don't go to my gym, there's a class that I like to take on Tuesday and Thursday, I walk. And so one of the things that I really like about that, as opposed to walking in the gym, is that I get to be outside and I get to discover and I get to see things that I wouldn't see if I was driving or if I was on a treadmill. And so it's been really fun just discovering things in my neighborhood. Just seeing how my neighborhood has changed from when I was a child. And I mean, there have been changes, and then there's some things that are like the same.
When you were talking about the cultural difference in moving to Seattle and
I think it's more like the houses, but it's just interesting and to see and just being out and going, I wonder what if I go this way, what's over there. And I'm just seeing like there's this huge garden, there's this field, and they have grown all this corn that you wouldn't be able to see were you not walking on this path. And so it's a combination. I think it's the quality time, it's the affirmation, because it's like really appreciating us. So I feel like that's a really wonderful gift. It's giving and receiving as well, because I'm feeling like I'm receiving, but I'm also giving in that it's my acknowledgement of greatness. Another way, and I think of, because when my business idea
Yeah.
and I'm working on
Yeah,
this.
service is
And it's
definitely
really about
also a way
sustainability.
that I've done that. I
And
got
so
so much
by
now.
creating a
I've been a
product
private caregiver,
that's
you know,
sustainable,
needing to bathe people or change their clothes
and
or
all
do
that
their
that
hair
means and
or
what that means.
um,
Because
other
when I
facial
change the
care,
product that I want to
that
produce,
kind
just
of thing.
because
And I am,
that whole
for the most part, very
sustainability
touchy-feely when I'm doing that. I had
of
a
it,
gentleman that
it's like how do
was
I,
getting dementia and he would get very
you know, what does that
irritable, so I
mean
need to be
to
careful.
me,
But
what does it
other than
mean
that,
as a company, what is,
for the most part,
okay.
Pleasant ending.
but it certainly.
So, my invitation is to consider over this next week, the homework for this next week is going to be to think about the different ways that you receive and that you can give love. You talked about a particular commitment. Anyone who would like to share a commitment that occurred today? Okay. Okay.
Well, I thought, oh, go ahead.
No.
It occurred to me that there are some people at Bridge Park that I like very much, and we'll stop and talk for a few minutes. And it occurred to me that I could just say, well, as we were leaving, I could just say, well, let's have a hug.
Ah,
You know, just kind of casually, not a long hug. God forbid. But that I might be able to get away with that with a certain number of people. I'm not thinking of every single person I encounter in the hall or anything like that. Anyway, that's sort of, I'm thinking and considering the commitment to doing that.
okay. Thank you. Steph?
And so I was sharing because in my business idea, you know, around my fashion design, I've changed just category about what I want to produce because of this whole sustainability and wanting to provide something that is beneficial for the planet, for the consumer, something that it's just not in this age of throwaway clothing. It's something that people can keep and hand down and use. And using resources that practice those types of things. So if it's more organic, you know, and how are they dyeing, and you know, what's their process, how are they treating their employees, and so it's really a shift, you know, as opposed to just what I wanted to do, versus what do I want to do that's going to be a benefit. So, yes.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to create the space. So the invitation is to just be present to how along those different ways of love, the quality time, the service, the gifts, the kind words, and the physical touch.
Oh,
As we consider those and how it is that we put ourselves in the world. Just take a deep breath in and breathe out, knowing that we are all put here to be vessels of love. That we are on top of this little blue round marble that is moving through space, and that we have the opportunity to be conscious givers and receivers of love. Because how important, how significant is it to let another person know that we have received their love? What does it mean to them to know that we have been a place where their love has come and it has landed?
It's also another way of giving.
Yeah.
Yes.
So to just be this week, let the stewardship for our planet start, like Mykal said, loving ourselves imbues this planet that we share. Because as we are loving presences on this world, think how that, the vibration of that, the vibration of how we are as loving people in this world can change